I'm going to talk for 10 minutes. The American people are going to lose $2.5 million in the course of the next 10 minutes. Success only comes at someone else's expense. There's an adversarial relationship between the gambling operator and the citizen who gambles. You can't think of another business where there's really an adversarial relationship, where they're trying to take you down. Out of 500,000 accounts they had, only 50 of these accounts were found profitable. And then if you're one of those few people that actually wins at this, they actually restrict your account. But what we have with predatory gambling today is taxation by exploitation. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Les Bernal, and I'm the National Director for Stop Predatory Gambling. Welcome to our national conference. Our title of our conference this year is Why Predatory Gambling is America's Most Neglected Major Problem. And I think by the course of this next day and a half, when you leave here, you will fully understand why that is not an understatement, that it truly is America's most neglected problem. I want to take 30 seconds and tell you a little bit about our organization of Stop Predatory Gambling. We are a national 501c3 that's based in Washington, D.C. That's the homepage to our website. Our mission is to reveal the truth behind gambling operators to prevent more victims. So we're in this business to get out and say the facts about what is happening in America when it comes to predatory gambling. And our network, okay, we have a network of citizens and partner groups across the United States. We're involved in all 50 states. We are, without question, the most politically diverse movement in the country. So there's not another organization in the country that is more politically diverse, more faith diverse, more geographically diverse group of people who work together in a period of time in our country. We were so divided politically from a partisan standpoint. We are extremely unique in that way, and it's something I'm extremely proud of, and it's a credit to the members of our network who really are attracted to this fight. They bring a certain high level of character to this, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. And I want to emphasize that we are an organization that we don't take any money from the commercialized gambling industry. So it's completely funded by individual donations and other small foundations from across the country. So with that, last thing I want to emphasize is just some ground rules for our national conference. We are, because we're so diverse politically, we don't, kind of wade off onto other topics. You know what I mean? If you become friends with somebody, sure, and you want to talk one-on-one on other issues of the day, you're certainly welcome to do that. What makes this organization function is we have a respect for everybody from where they, what their points of view are and so on. We don't wade into other issues. And so if you're going to talk about politics, it's in the context of is this specific elected official, for example, bad on predatory gambling? Then regardless of their party, then they're fair game. But we don't make commentary on political, we don't like political statements either one side or the other side. Okay, so I just ask everybody to kind of respect that culture as our ground rules. And the last thing I want to welcome is we have a lot of people who are watching by live stream across the United States for the next day and a half, and I want to welcome you. I want to do my best to help you follow along. In the email we sent out, we sent a link that has the actual program that we are handing out to people who are attending in person. So I hope that you will follow along with that. We are at the very beginning. This is the kind of a welcome session of it, and you'll see in your program there's a unique video link, a Zoom link for each individual session. So I'll try to remind myself to make that announcement at the beginning of each session that you'll need to transition to the next link. All right, so my goal, I'm going to speak just for a few minutes before I turn it over to one of our very special guests, is to give a very kind of concise definition of what is predatory gambling. When we use that term, what do we mean by it? And so and hopefully when you leave here today, you'll be able to articulate it pretty clearly. Okay. One second. I did this manually. So my next slide here is this. When predatory, in a concise one sentence, predatory gambling is when governments partner with powerful corporate gambling interests to use commercialized gambling And by commercialized gambling, we're talking about gambling being run as a business, okay, for profit. That's the key component here. That's what separates it from the March Madness brackets and the Friday night poker games and the friendly wager on the golf course. It's being run as a business for profit, and the intent is to exploit and defraud citizens and their communities. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. The impact, so what are the impacts of this predatory gambling in our country and really in the world? So here in the United States, over the next 8 years, the American people are on a downward spiral to lose more than $1 trillion of personal wealth to government-sanctioned gambling, to predatory gambling, okay? That's an average of 120 to 130 billion dollars of lost personal wealth every year. And to break it down into real numbers, because those are such huge numbers to look at, that's $250,000 of personal wealth every minute. 250 grand, the exact number is $247,000 every minute. Okay, so I'm going to talk for 10 minutes. The American people are going to lose $2.5 million in the course of the next 10 minutes. Okay, huge cash. Okay, another key impact of predatory gambling in our country and why it's America's most neglected problem is commercialized gambling, predatory gambling, has become the public voice of American government to citizens today. Okay? And by the public voice, the advertising and marketing, that is what we advertise to the American people more than anything else. Think about what else government advertises. Join the military, go to your local state university. All of the advertising we spend on gambling, it supersedes that immensely. Okay? It's an incredible, when you think about it, that the idea that we as a nation, that's what we promote more than anything else through paid media, is getting citizens to gamble. Okay, and so what that's done is we've turned a nation of citizens who are small earners, who could be small savers, and we've turned us into a nation of habitual bettors. Okay? Habitual bettors. We've created this problem intentionally by spreading predatory gambling promoted by government in partnership with these powerful corporate gambling interests. Okay? And this advertising campaign of predatory gambling, the demographic that's been most affected by this in our country has been young people. It's been kids. Okay? Because what we've done is normalized a dangerous and addictive product. Okay. So predatory gambling in our country, it's metastasized like a cancer across this country, not because a grassroots movement. People weren't pounding the table in their respective communities. I want a casino here. I want online gambling in my kid's bedroom. I want $100 scratch tickets in low-income communities in Texas, so I can lose. People making minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, can go, work 2 days and lose it in 5 seconds on a $100 scratch ticket, sponsored by state government. There's been no grassroots movement for that in our country. Okay? It's been spread by politicians and these powerful corporate gambling interests of both political parties. Okay, and the key values here that have driven it are two things. It's greed of big gambling operators and the lust for political power of politicians of both parties. Okay, not all politicians, but some politicians. Okay. The other impact of the predatory gambling is half the gambling profits in this business come from citizens who've been addicted to gambling. The product is based on people who are addicted to it. They don't have a revenue model without it. Okay, it couldn't function without it. The addict is the bedrock of this industry. Okay, and in the end, more than 40 million Americans in our country are experiencing harm because of predatory gambling. And the way we come up with that number of 40 million Americans is there's a index referred to as the Problem Gambling Severity Index. I like to refer to it as the Gambling Addiction Severity Index. And they argue that 12 to 19% of citizens are affected by either have a loved one who are addicted to gambling, they themselves are addicted gambler. So you're looking at 40 million Americans in this country. So that when we talk about why it's America's most neglected problem, you're talking a huge impact, totally neglected in our country. Next slide, please. Okay, so real quick, I love to show this slide because people say, well, less people are going to do this anyways, right? This is just a normal business. I love, because they compare it to alcohol and so on. Well, in the alcohol industry, there's a whole business model. Lots and lots of companies that sell non-alcoholic drinks. Non-alcoholic wine, non-alcoholic beer, and so on. There's vodka, whiskey, and so on. It's a viable business. Why is there not a predatory gambling operator here in the United States or across the world that markets themselves as we're the responsible gambling operator? We're the not, they don't, because it's not a financially viable business model. Okay? So when someone says there's like alcohol, everything, it's nothing like alcohol. Nothing like it. And I'm going to touch on why real quick in a second. But think about it. They're not in the alcohol business. There's companies you can buy alcohol. If you don't want to drink alcohol but want to have a glass of wine, you can do that. In the commercialized gambling industry, there's no operator that markets themselves as we're the responsible gambling operators, and it's because it's not financially viable. Next slide, please. Okay. And so the core of this business, all right, so for many of you who've been in this issue for a long time, it took me a long time to really just internalize this truth. But at the core of this issue, the core of predatory gambling is it's a big con. Okay, it's a big con. It's a business that's illegal unless you partner with the government. Okay, because it's a form of fraud. All right, it's this idea that this false perception that's like any other business. And what separates the commercialized gambling business, the business when it's done for profit, is with sports gambling, regional casinos, state lotteries, online casinos, and so on. What separates it from every other business, including other vices like alcohol and tobacco, okay, is gambling is a big con game that citizens are conned into thinking that you're going to win money, okay, but in a scheme that's ultimately designed to get you fleeced. All right, so think of the comparison. You go buy yourself a piece of pizza, you go buy a ticket to a football game, you have a glass of wine. That's what you receive in return. It's a one-for-one exchange. In the commercialized gambling business, what you get when you put your money down is the lure that you might win money. Okay, it's a financial exchange right at its core. That's what commercialized gambling is. It's a financial exchange. But this exchange is mathematically stacked against you so that the longer you participate in it, the more frequently you participate in it, it's inevitable that you're going to lose your money. Okay, that's the con. All right? Success only comes at someone else's expense. And this line here, I'm borrowing from a good friend of mine I just developed now from the UK, Matt Zarb-Cousin, said this yesterday, and I love it. It feeds right into the predatory gambling experience. What makes it different than every other business is in this business, there's an adversarial relationship between the gambling operator and the citizen who gambles. You can't think of another business where there's really an adversarial relationship, where they're trying to take you down, okay? At least a legal business, right? That's what this business is about. And so that's why it's a form of financial fraud, and it's similar to other forms of financial fraud, like price gouging and false advertising, both of which are illegal in our country. All right? As is commercialized gambling, except when you partner with the state. I can't run my own casino. I can't run my own online gambling operator. All right, and here's the math. You're gonna hear from Natasha Shull tomorrow. Okay, this is to me the best, most simplest graph of how the math works behind the big con. This is a graph from her famous book, Addiction by Design, where she just shows the more money you have over time, that you're gonna end up losing it all. Okay, the more time you spend on that device, you're going to end up losing all your money. Okay, the amount of spins you put into it, you're going to lose. So whether it's scratch tickets, lottery scratch tickets, online gambling, sports gambling, that's in its simplicity, that's the model. Okay, that's the math behind the big con. Right. Other quick examples of the big con, and this is right from an ESPN reporter who writes the gambling column. He had quoted a bookmaker. Out of 500,000 accounts they had, only 50 of these accounts were found profitable. That's an exact quote from the ESPN's gambling reporter to a newspaper. Like, 50 were profitable. The rest of them are all losing money, right? But yet they advertise it all about winners. Okay, and then if you're one of those few people that actually wins at this, they actually restrict your account. Okay, what's more of a bigger con than that? They don't let you win. Okay, all right, and real quick, a lot of arguments. Well, we hear you all on these arguments, but all this illegal gambling's happening. If we weren't doing this, that is an industry-driven narrative. The New York Times just took took the cover right off that whole narrative really well, and it's Above the Fold series they did in November of 2022. How illegal gambling is it's great a fake narrative to push commercialized gambling across the country. They've been talking about illegal gambling for 40 years in this country. Illegal gambling is higher than it's ever ever been as a result of it. That's the truth. And then you also hear arguments here in this country about, oh, if we don't do it here in Connecticut, they're going to go to New York, or, I live in Pennsylvania, they're going to go to New Jersey. Those arguments recycled over and over. These are national companies that use the same arguments in the same states. Okay, it's part of the PR narrative because there's no inherent grassroots movement for this. Okay, and this is my favorite fact about the big con of all, is we call this phenomenon the Hypocrites Hall of Fame. Is on our website. We have a list of all these prominent American gambling operators, casino operators, slot machine makers, governors, state legislators, mayors, who stand up and say, hey, you know something? This casino is great for your community. It's great for your family. But you know what? I don't gamble myself. I don't gamble myself. Right? But it's great for you to do it. It's great for the Asian American community in Boston to do it. But Steve Wynn says the only way you win in a casino is by owning it. Okay? Yet he sends the buses every day, 10 times a day into Chinatown. Okay? But anyway, you want to check that. It's called the Hypocrite Hall of Fame, and it's a very special group of inductees in there. All right, next slide. All right, so kind of winding down here, many of the facts you're going to hear this weekend, like, none of this is new. Like, a lot of these facts have been around for 30 years. Like, we know how much money they make from addicts. The idea that this is an economic gimmick, it's not a good tax revenue source. Like, this isn't any new information, okay? This has been known for a long time here, but it's never been about facts and numbers, okay? It's been driven by two things. It's driven by greed and a lust for power. Okay, that's what you're up against. The truth is on our side on this. Next slide, please. Okay, and I'm going to close with this one. And this is what drives me as much as anything on this. We live in a country, and without due respect to our friends from the UK who are visiting us, one of our founding principles in our country, and I'm from Boston, so this is a big part of our culture up there, was, all these guys went they boarded a British warship that had all this tea on it, and they dumped all the tea into Boston Harbor, a Boston Tea Party. And that was that direct action was a result of this idea that we could not have taxation without representation in America. That's like one of our core principles. No taxation without representation. But what we have with predatory gambling today is taxation by exploitation. And the time has come when we add the tenet, the democratic principle of no taxation by exploitation. So thank you for being here today. That's what predatory gambling is.